And welcome to another episode of Magicians Only. Here we are with Nick Lewin, part 2. This is amazing. This conversation with Nick took me by surprise because he really opened up and shared so much about not just his life, but about how he works as a magician, how he approaches an audience, how he approaches an act. I mean, we really get into the nitty gritty during this conversation, how to open a show, how to pace a show, how to do the lighting, how to handle difficult rooms, how to close a show, and not to mention all of the experiences and all of this how he had this place in Las Vegas and how he made that work. There's just so much to learn. Check this out. I think this is going to be like a 3 or 4 part. I'm still editing. It's going to be at least a 3 or 4 parter because there's just too much gold here. So huge thanks to Nick Lewin. Here we go. Nick Lewin on life as a magician and magical rock star. So important, Nick. Just the idea of like, how do you approach booking? Like when you would get called for gigs, did Susan take care of it, or did you have an agent do it, or did you handle it mostly yourself?
ICM.
Okay. All right. So they handled it mostly.
And I had a good management company, but I was doing a lot of TV in those days. That's why I've always followed your acting career. I went to the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, which I guess our famous person now is Daniel Craig went there.
Yeah, Guildhall is like, it was one of the big famous drama schools in England. Yeah.
Well, it is, yeah. And I went there and never acted until I got to, and it was old school. They taught us how to use grease paint. Now,
oh yeah,
use grease paint. I don't know how. Put a red
green, yeah, like super heavy.
So anyhow, I had acne till I was about 40, just based on the grease paint. I'm pretty sure.
It was Leishner, wasn't it? It was the big greasy.
That's right. You look like
filled it every crack.
So. Well, so I was doing it. That's when I was working the London nightclub. So I was doing those really late nights. Usually, I think it was 4 or 6 shows a night. Then I'd be there, and I didn't have a huge amount of time for it. They did all those sort of silly exercises. Now, lie on the floor. You're a piece of bacon, and you're frying. Dear God, no.
Yeah. Classic.
I guess I didn't think I'd be acting at that point, but I did get a chance to do some great shows before you arrived, and I was very, very lucky. I did.
Don't you think, though, that skill set, Nick, from that you learned, because Chris Philpott and I have a talk, as you know, we're putting together this acting for magicians kind of thing. And don't you think that the things that you learned from that you've been able to apply? I mean, just connecting with an audience, breaking through a fourth wall, energy placement, all of those things, projection, preparation,
breath,
breathing. I was going to say breathing and relaxation.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, and I was working well in the evenings, and then I said, no, I think this cruise job sounds good. It took off.
Lifestyle takes over. Is there a technique, talking about relaxation just for a second, is there a technique that you arrive at a job, right? And I don't know, maybe it's just been a bad day or it's stressful, and you look at the audience, and you know how sometimes we judge a crowd before we go out, often wrongly. I have to say, there are times when I've looked out at a crowd and thought, oh, these guys are going to suck, and they've been amazing, and vice versa. But you're stressed out. Do you have a technique that you use that just kind of centers you and calms you before you step out?
Yep. I literally ground myself. It's the feeling from your feet, you balance and kind of put my feet sideways, which changes the whole shape of the body. And then I do some pretty deep box breathing. So I do that stuff all work. The old days was much easier. You just had a drink. But
right.
There you go. That was
the old days.
And I've done that a time or two in my life, to be honest. In the comedy clubs, that was almost essential on a Friday.
The Magic Castle was like that all the time. I was saying to someone just the other day, I remember, going in the close-up rooms, and there was always a glass of whiskey right next to the deck of cards. That was almost the image, wasn't it, of the close-up magician? Cigar, the glass of whiskey, a deck of cards.
This is my life now. My true love was always card magic, and I've always loved card magic. Now, and I'm just in terms might be of interest to people watching. At a certain point, though, I was doing close-up shows, any kind of show that came up. I did a private house party. oh, we've got a special guest, who he loves magic. Okay, would you let him do, And I said, of course. That was Jimmy Stewart, James Stewart, and things like. So when you were doing house parties and things in LA, you didn't
Oh, in
know.
LA. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm going to do a whole episode on that because I did some crazy Beverly Hills mansion parties it's hard. It's a culture shock, I think, when you come from, I come from South End, and the next minute I find myself in, the homes of Marvin Davis and Lawrence Kasdan and Randy Newman. And I'm like, oh, this is a whole nother world and way of living. So we talked about how you would link these things together in order to create a sense of whole, and B, not to let go of those kind of reins once you get an audience, right? You go out there and you, do you have a hard and fast rule for how you open a show?
Yes.
What is that?
I will share it. As I come out through on stage, it's all about that instant reaction as you come out and walking to the mic, doing whatever you're doing. I mean, I wear a headset, but I will still have a microphone on the stand, center stage, so I can walk towards, and use both mics, in fact. So when I come out, I like to walk out, and Billy had a thing. It always goes back to Billy with me. People are Vernonologists. I'm a Billyologist. And he used to say that when you start with the audience, you have to look around, see everybody in the room, including people you can't see, but they're there. And you had to imagine that there was a thread that was going from their eyes and arriving on you. And it was a centering thing. And it's very interesting, to do that. And that led me to absolutely surefire thing about opening. You should never look at the props unless you have to for some dramatic reason. When I come out, all the openers I do allow me to look around, smile at the audience. But if I'm doing the color change silks down to here, when I want them to look back at the hand, I'll put it close to my face, so it's close to the microphone. They'll be like this. And I do a double. I do this little double. I look at something twice, and what's happening? So that was something that I learned, to be able to blend those two things. But the opening trick, I think you really have to look at the audience. I think it has fast. I mean, I love the color changing silk because I beat up the audience a bit. I tell them when to laugh, when not to laugh, when to clap. I stop them.
Right. You train them essentially during that trick, right?
Within that, I really try because I think you have to be quite tough with an audience. I read a lot of stuff on the social media on these things, and they kind of confuse being strict with an audience, which I think we can do if it's a difficult audience, and being so nice, and being Mr. Good Guy. Well, I was at the castle. I didn't work at the castle for 30 years, incident. I just got my 50-year pin.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Be nicer if they gave you a free membership after that, but leaving that aside.
That's not going to happen. I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
Yeah. So where was I?
Right. So
fascinated enough.
You're at the castle.
The castle, yeah. Well, the castle was just so important to me in terms of the amount of shows you could do. Absolutely. It was like 24 shows a week or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So you could go in with a piece of material that was new. You could come out at the end of the week and you would find that you had a pretty polished little hunk of material. That's how I learnt my linking finger rings. I broke it in almost entirely in the parlor because it was just perfect for it. And Dave Noonan used to come down. He always had a chair put in at least once in the week because he liked to watch the finger rings. That was his favorite. He always thought I was a loss to magic. Oh, give up that comedy. Why do you need comedy? And he paid me a wonderful compliment once. He said, well, I said, I don't like comedy. You'd be better off as a sleight of hand guy. But if I actually had to make a living doing magic, I never have, you understand, performing magic. He said, I would pay you whatever money you wanted to get that routine. It's got a face here. It's got...
Oh, your linking finger ring routine is great. I have your linking finger ring routine. It's amazing. Yeah. No, it's one of the best, I got to say. And and you're in the audience, you're around the audience, do you close with that? Yeah.
No, never. One of the things that I found very useful with the finger rings is doing corporate events. If you're talking, and they do these kind of groups,
Like workshop
friend
sessions,
building, whatever they call it, because we don't do it.
team building.
So it's.
We're talking about like, so when you do these corporate team building things, you find that the finger rings helps break that?
Absolutely, because I will take one ring from somebody in the sales team, one from one of the customers, one from research and development, one from the office. And then later on I'll go back, get the ladies' ring. But that when you hold them up and you talk about how much stronger and you do it to all those people, it's very strong.
That's great.
That was a big trick that I learned there.
I saw someone open with a linking finger.
I wish I'd asked a lot more questions, let me tell you.
Yeah.
I got to spend some good quality. Bruce Savon was a good friend, and we used to get together. We never talked magic. We only talked music. We would, just go over old rock and roll and blues. And
I was lucky with Bruce Savon I remember reading Ultimate Secrets of Card Magic, and, he was like one of the guys, he was in that book. So when I got to the castle, he was kind of like, Bruce would stick his chest out, and he would be like Di Vernon's right-hand boy. But I was very lucky to spend time with him and his family on a magic cruise. And when Bruce was with his family, he couldn't really be that persona that he developed for the castle. So I got to know the real him, right? The warmer side of him. And that was great. That's the side that I got to know, love. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly right. Bruce always seemed to me desperately shy, and that everything else was something he put on. He had that. And a lot of people don't like Bruce or didn't like him because he's very direct. And
I was abrasive at times.
Story for you. I was playing the Magic Castle did a day buyout, and it was a bar mitzvah. And they're at hell to begin with. And this was like the bar mitzvah from hell.
Yeah, I was the king of bar mitzvahs. Trust me, I know.
What used to be the showroom downstairs. And I was there with Ron Wilson. Now, in those days, Ron didn't want to get up until 12. He didn't wake up till 12 ever. This was like 11 in the morning. So he was very groggy. Nick, I don't think I will. I do a show today. And I said, don't worry, you do it. And I went out, and they were just monsters. And then I went out to see Ron working for them. And Ron did his Elmsley newspaper tear, and a big packet fell out. And I thought, this is cool. What's that? And he just picked them and said, and these, I know what you're thinking. Those are whole too. Goodbye. And he was on it because it was full of torn pieces. They went straight through the pocket. He was just shaking. And we said, well, wonder how Bruce is doing. We close up with these kids. We went up and we saw Bruce. I can take care of these people. They don't worry me. I never lose my cool with them. I said, wow. They stood watching the show. And he did it. And at the end, he left his cups and balls and the loaves, everything on the table. He'd leave everything on the table. Whoa! And go away, come back again, collect it. Well, he did this. He disappeared behind the curtain for about a nanosecond. And before you could even count to two, every prop was gone. And then Bruce came out for sort of a second, but where's my cups? Where's my props? He totally said, shut that door. Nobody's leaving. If I find a kid with one of my cups after this, I'm going to break your arm.
Dude, listen,
was the other side of Bruce.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think the bar mitzvahs were such an interesting circuit, and I did the Beverly Hills bar mitzvah circuit for years, and there was an art form to it. I think in those days, the kids were really, because the kids are 13 or 14 years old. It's just like, and the adults are not supervising them at all. And so they get to grab things and it can be really hard. Now, from what I understand, it's even harder because they're on their phones. They don't even bother to watch but back in the day, I knew I had to quit bar mitzvahs when this one kid put his hand in my pocket, kept putting his hand in my pocket and pulling stuff out. And it was the bar mitzvah boy. And I remember grabbing his hand. It was in my pocket. And I was like, is that what you do? Is that what a man does? Puts his hand in another man's pocket? I said, you're a man today, right? You're a man. Should we go outside and settle this man to man? And I'm just like, holy shit, I'm losing it. And the kid said to me, I'm going to go tell my dad. And I said, well, that's not what a man would do, is it? That's what a boy would do. And I went and packed everything away and left. And that was the last bar mitzvah I ever did. I just was like,
immeasurably in my estimation.
Oh my,
they were tough. They were tough. And I did.
Again, but a place to work, a place to, you know, to deal with whatever. Because you're right. No matter how much rehearsal you have, you cannot imagine the things that are going to happen when you're actually in a showroom. I mean, what was the craziest? Because you did the London clubs, but you also did Vegas. How long was your Vegas show running? 5 years, was it?
5 years.
Yeah,
it was a lot of work. It was 2 65-minute shows a day, 6 days a week, 48 weeks a year.
Damn.
And I'm the guy who never wanted to do a long run. My entire career has been based on not wanting to. I've turned down more things, but this just kind of happened. And I didn't fall wool. Everyone assumes I fall wool. I was on a salary and I made a lot of money on merch. I had stuff there. And
how did that come about? Let's talk about that for a second. I want to get back to openers and all that, but I know we're kind of darting all over the place, but it's all connected. It's all connected. It's all about connection. But how, so you're doing the London clubs, you come over to LA, you've got a really good agent, ICM, nothing to sneeze at. And how did Vegas come about?
Well, I first played Vegas in 75. I did a little gig at the old Aladdin, and it was like one of the old school reviews. And I followed an act which appeared to be like a tropical storm hitting this little shack. And there was like 2 people in it who were, you know, then stripping their clothes off. One of them was a priest, which I thought at the time was very, very strange. Yes. That was the first time, so that doesn't really count. But I did all the clubs all the time in Vegas. It really got to the point. And I did my seance show there 3 times, which was fun.
Amazing.
But eventually, there wasn't a day show. Well, there was one day show, and that was a mini production thing downtown. But there'd never been a one-person show in that way through. I got together with it was the host of the room. It wasn't the entertainment director. And we figured out that out in Branson, they were doing, you know, breakfast shows at that point. I think that's changed a bit. But and I said, you know, I think, oh, no, Vegas is a night town. I said, I don't think so. It's hot in the afternoon. Let's give it a shot. And I went off on a cruise. I was on Crystal Cruises, and we drove down to San Francisco. I got on the boat, hated it so much, everything about it, that I phoned Susan from Vancouver, said, okay, I'll take that gig. And we'd been fighting about money, you know, and I said, I'll take the gig. I'll go in for 2 months. So
why did you hate Crystal Cruises, by the way? Just as an outside, what was it about Crystal Cruises because that's a very high-end cruise ship, right? Was it just the people?
Well, it is. But the bosses of the people who are on Crystal actually sail on silver seas. And that's kind of
everything you need to know, didn't it? Yeah.
It's not an easy gig. I mean, and it was a shock for me because I was coming off ships that were not like that particularly. So I said, okay, well, to heck with that one. And I went in for 2 months. But I went in with a publicist. And because I didn't think the Maxim was going to put any money into it, and they didn't. I had a very good publicist. So we bought covers in those days. You'd buy the covers. I really worked it. But from week 1, it was pretty much sold out. And so
there was nothing else to do. You're dead right. There were people, and people also they've lost a lot of money. They want something to do that isn't gambling at that point. They need to rest, recoup. And get out of that heat. That was really smart. Now, of course,
absolutely,
there's so many afternoon shows.
In different things with it.
Yeah.
So that was, but as I say, I didn't forewall it. Forewalling, the trouble is that you have to have the backup from the hotel and the marketing and the advertising to make and they don't care because they like renting out their rooms. The shows change. They, get the money in.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, the old days of like, you're going to get hired for Las Vegas is that I don't know that even ever happens now. I can't imagine they're just renting out there because you take all the risk. It's just another example of the corporations putting all the risk onto the little people. But but you're doing this show in Las Vegas, and you are so in that. But Vegas is a different place to like promote. I mean, marketing is something I'm very weak at. Everyone who knows me will say that everything I do is the best kept secret in the world because I'm just so bad at marketing. But Vegas is different, right? You got to get the taxi drivers on your side. You've got to have shows for the local people. Invite the maitre d's. When it was, I guess that was the time of the maitre d's as well, wasn't it? That you paid to get good seats.
Oh yes, getting that seating. When I left, Mac had been filling in for me. For about 3 years, we tried different people with no success. It was not an easy gig in many, many ways.
Because you needed stamina and you needed to appeal to all different levels of family?
Well, yeah, I don't remember there ever being many kids there at all. So it wasn't really a family show in those terms.
Yeah.
But it was, we did very well from day one. But without the covers, the press night and all those things. And I took care of that because I figured if I'm going to make this work, they're not going to do anything. The entertainment director just put together a show called Hell on Heels, a girly show. The best thing about it was the title, because that's pretty good, Hell on.
Pretty much. Well, that was my dating life for a while, Nick.
Yeah. And it was just awful. And they put a lot of money into it. A lot of money. But that was his pet thing. And then nobody was there. I was selling out 2 shows in the afternoon. And so he wasn't totally happy about this entertainment director. Then his show totally folded and went with it. And I think when I came in, they just spent a lot of money on this review. You know how much it cost to not even a small show. When I came in, I was doing the linking. I was doing the rings, the big rings, and I'd sometimes do that as an opener to the small rings. I do the linking rings. And I said, but this would be better if I could walk off and do it. And I used to do a bit where the ring got caught on the microphone cord, and I was wearing a headset, but and then I thread it through. And it was a funny bit of pantomime. And I didn't like the color of the lead. It was black and you couldn't see it together. I said, well, I'd like to get a red cord. Can you get a red microphone? Well, okay. And they paid $25 for the show for 5 years. And I have it downstairs. I've got that very red cord. So it was a pretty good time. I mean, I never wanted to do a long. The best era were the opening shows, when you got to open for artists, because that was the best audiences. They were there to see the headliner, and boy.
So I remember, but I always have a memory of Sammy Davis Jr. appearing at the Trop and then saying to my now ex-wife at the time, we'll come back next year and see him. And then he was gone. And I regretted it. But I was talking to a magician who used to open for him and just had the most amazing stories. Who did you open for? What kind of acts did you open for?
I did, let's see, Reba McEntire, Tony Bennett.
Okay.
What's your country people? I'm a country fan. So some of those were my most favorite.
Wait, you've got a country and Western audience, and then you've got this English magician coming out. So, I mean, to some people, that would be a very difficult spot to do because the audience doesn't really want to see you. They want to see the big artist they've come to see, and they want to get you off stage.
I never experienced that. It was always like, he's here because, Kenny Rogers, or Kenny likes it. That was a good TV gig. I went in to teach. They hired me to be the teaching and the handwork for The Gambler, the original Kenny Rogers movie.
Sure.
Very as well. He doesn't know anything about cards. He can't handle them, but we have to make it look like, I said, well, okay.
The irony of that.
Got together with Kenny. I said, Kenny, what are we doing? And he took the cards. He did a big riffle down to here, shuffled them in the air. And I said, I said, they said you never handle cards. They said, I played poker backstage since I was 15. And I said, do me a favor. Just don't tell anybody.
You want to keep the gig.
They did a hand shot. I still get checks for them. You know about residual checks. They're the best.
Yeah. What's left of them now, unfortunately, it's a dying thing. You're in Vegas, you're opening for these big celebrities, you're doing like 2 65-minute shows a day. think 60. I think a 60-minute show is like the perfect time. A lot of people are doing 90-minute shows now, and it just feels too long. You know, I mean, I need to go to the bathroom, 50 minutes into the show, let alone the audience. But what is? But I just want to know
Wait till
what
you get to my age, Steve. It'll be every minute.
I have a routine. I was working at Hobson's Theatre, and I had this whole routine about needing to go. Like, I know what you're thinking. He's been on stage for an hour. How has he been able to do that and not have to leave to go to the bathroom? Well, I have a technique, and to go into this whole routine about how I go to the bathroom without them knowing. You're open, right? But you're doing these shows in Las Vegas. What was Vegas is famous for crazy stories, right?
Vegas, Reno, and Tahoe. I did all three.
Right, Vegas, Reno, and Tahoe.
Boy, that was a fun one. And he was a big deal in those days. And he was so crazy. I mean, this was at pretty much the height of his madness because, he predicted for years.
Wait, who was this? Sorry, I missed the name.
Paul Williams. He wrote amongst other, he wrote the Muppet songs. It's not,
Sure, the songwriter, yeah.
So they could not deal with him. I mean, they had to, he was out there. He was so out there. And then I never knew how long I was going to do because if they managed to corral him, sort of two people would hold him and they'd wave to me on stage and I'd wind up, they'd get him off. But if they couldn't find him, that was a different story. And it's strange. So that one was, I had sort of the reverse of that, opening for Paul Anka, who I'll be very nice about.
Okay.
And
there's so much in that pause.
He had it since, for a start, I mean, when I first came in, one of his people said, well, please, you're not to make eye contact with Mr. Anchor. Not making contact? Okay. So, and he had a deal. He would go into the audience and he would decide when the audience was ready for it. So therefore, I would get a light and had to wind up in a minute, no matter where I was, what I was doing.
Wow.
When I saw that light. So that was a tough one.
So you brought them to a certain point of warmth and energy and fever pitch, and then he's like, I'm taking it from here.
Yes, I think it was more psychological than anything. And once I did it was a strange, this was the Nugget in Spark. Used to do a lot of work there. They had an underground passageway, or not a passage. It wasn't like a tunnel. And at one point I'm walking down, and Paul Anka walked from there. So no way I could avoid, we were like this and everything. I said, Mr. Anka, he put out his hand and we did a little shake and I feel him shudder, but he was quite polite. I appreciated that. Those were great. The comedy clubs, well, the comedy clubs in Vegas were something that just took the place by storm.
Yeah. Well, that was when, now you're talking like 80s and 90s when comedy clubs really boomed, right? I mean, in LA, but you could do a night going and some people still doing the Laugh Factory, and then you run over to the Comedy Store, and then you pop down to the Improv. And and those were, I remember I did an open mic once at the Laugh Factory, and the guy that owns it, Jamie, was that his name?
Jamie Father.
Yeah. So I'm waiting outside, I'm early days in LA, and I'm waiting outside the Laugh Factory, open mic night, right? They go in and they're like, you've got 3 minutes. So I'm like, all right, 3 minutes. So I decided to do comedy straitjacket escape. And I'm just starting to get out when they give me the light. Now, thinking back, I think that's a very funny bit, is to take all this time to get into it and then go, oh, that's my time. Good night. You know what I mean? Just get wrapped and chained. But at the time, I was stubborn and I'm like, no, I'm going to get... So they wouldn't play my music. So I get out of the jacket and I do the whole thing and I'm way over. So at the end of it, Jamie would sit down. You would all sit down with Jamie one at a time and he would give you notes, which was really great. And I remember being so offended at the time, this is so silly, because I sat down with him and he said, lose the magic. It was kind of like when Vernon said to you, lose the comedy. It was like, you're a funny guy, you work well with the audience, you don't need the magic tricks. And I remember thinking, no, I'm a magician. Now maybe I should have listened to him. But those were
you are a magician, Steve.
I am.
There are certain people who are magicians. End of story. I mean, you know them They have a love for the history. They think around corners. I mean, it's an interesting community, the magic world. It really is. But I never was tempted to drop the magic. And I heard this plenty of times. I headlined for 11 years on the comedy club circuit, headline only, because that was just the nature of it. And it was the most constructive time I've ever had within that. What were the joy? I learned how to write comedy. This is another thing. Magicians often think comedy comes in books, or it doesn't. It comes when you sit down with one of those pads, and it can be anything in the act. At one point, you pick up a phone. You want to be able to say, that would be funny. Oh, look at that. My account's been banned on Facebook. Whatever it is. You know, it's just always write something. And I think the other thing that might be worth sharing is the entire concept of writing jokes in threes.
Okay.
They have to come in threes. You have the first one introduces the topic and gets a laugh, and then the second one reflects back on what they've just reacted to. Then the third one, that's the powerful one. That's the one where you get the big laugh. So if you can write those individual lines and then add two more to them, you're now in the business of building up blocks of comedy.
You're topping the joke. It's a fine line, isn't it? I remember when I still do a lot of sitcom, and there's this thing that happens where you can top the joke, but you can also do a joke on a joke, and then that's what they would say. No, that's a joke on a joke. You can't do it. You can top a joke, but it's a fine line. Can you give us an example of something that would be like an introductory line, the next step, and the next step?
I'd have to think about that. Well, I would do a piece about my mum being Scottish.
Okay.
But my dad was English, so I'm half English, half Scottish. So I grew up hating myself. And that would lead on into, but I met my Uncle Jock, and this man needed subtitles. So he walked up and he said, and I said, can I have a vowel? But that would be taking one joke, but they're all connected. And that was the point, to keep them connected through.
It's weird that you say, it's funny that you mention this right now, this idea of like, comedy is not looking up jokes in Orban's joke file, right? It's actually sitting down with a pencil, because actually psychologically that connects your brain, the hand to the brain, a lot better than typing. But I was just reading, part of my research on the egg bag, I came across this routine that was published by Trevor Lewis, right? And it was a shot glass. It's like Billy's routine. It's basically the shot glass vanish in the egg bag. And he published his routine with Rick Johnson years ago. I want to say 70s or 80s. And it came up for sale on a magic auction. So I got the instructions, I got the bag, I got the whole thing. And it's a lovely routine, shot of whiskey, it vanishes, keeps reappearing. And my plan was to just keep producing more and more shot glasses, and then keep filling it up, vanish it, bring it out, shove it, take the shot, and just get progressively more and more hammered as I'm doing the trick. But I learned it, and I performed it, and I teach it on Magic on the Go. And in his instructions, it's a funny thing. He says, I did a lot of research for this. He says, and that means I went through the joke books so you don't have to. Right? And I found all of these lines. Here's a good line, and here's a line that works. And nothing's connected, nothing's organic, because it's not coming from you or your experience or how you speak. And the perfect example of that is, you remember Terry Seabrook, right? Comedy magician, legend, used to work all the time. Terry had the cigarette in the jacket routine. Now, he published it with all the one-liners, and everyone I know used to do it. Some people still do in places where they still smoke. But I just recently saw a video of Terry performing it, and it was like revelatory, because it was night and day, because when he said those lines, they came from somewhere. They were connected to a thought process. It was like it was spontaneous. Most people I've seen it repeat the lines because it's in the instructions, and then they don't understand why they're saying it.
Absolutely. I have a problem with the word patter, because if you look up in the dictionary, it talks about uninformed, random, it just, wow. I like to think of a monologue, and you have to give something. One of the things I think that I've learned that was the most important was putting more texture in the act, and also trying to get an emotional moment in the act. Now, it's tough to be emotional without being really I'm a little boy. I'd never
Without
seen
being
snow
cheesy. Yeah.
before. Okay.
My granddad, he's dead, and I'm doing this for him. Yeah, yeah.
The little boy cried. He said, but I wanted to see white bits of tissue paper.
I wanted to see snow.
You got a bit of emotion is good. Now, I'm not very outgoing about myself. I'm just not. I don't like to do, so a lot of the stuff I do is invented through, but it's based on something way back. So it does have that validity into it. But I think texture is something that comedy magicians particularly do not think enough about. They will start the show at one tempo. They'll go for an hour. Then they'll same tempo, and they'll finish. And then you
That's
look
exhausting, though, isn't it?
5 card tricks, or
Yeah.
this kind of a thing. Whereas you really need to plan out so you sort a trick. A lot of magicians. Another thing I've noticed: people send me tapes now. I do reviews for people, which is interesting because I'm learning a lot doing it. I daren't tell them that I'm learning that much because they think I'm teaching them.
Yeah, yeah. They send you tapes of their shows for critiques and reference.
Many times the tricks are all the same length. Now, this is something, and I'll go, whoa, and it's like somebody's got a mental, oh, this is what you do, boom. And no, you need to have a small, fast trick here. You need to have something a little more measured here. You have to really think about every aspect of what's going on in that way.
You know who I studied when I was doing?
I do a piece, gypsy yarn or gypsy thread,
which you've been doing forever. You're kind of known for your gypsy yarn, right?
Well, I kind of am.
Signature
It was
piece, yeah.
the trick that made me want to be a magician.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I used to go to the Conway Hall in London. They had a magic night. I thought it was the biggest theatre in the world. I was going there when I was about 12.
Yeah,
It wasn't that big. But I saw Billy, and I saw Billy do the thread, and he had the place in stitches, and I thought it was the most perfect piece of magic I'd ever seen because it was funny. The time, everything was right on it. So I've always been very fond of that trick. And I don't like any of the, people put out new versions of things that make no sense, and they just do. I mean, because people don't see much magic. The bottom line, it's not like they've seen other people do this, but you have to really just mix up all that stuff, but you have to take notes afterwards and know what worked and what didn't. You throw a bit in.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did find the act really, and I guess this started in the comedy clubs. I wanted to put in a piece that was a totally different feel. So I did the gypsy yarn I talked about, and it was basically the story of Billy. But being me, I wouldn't say so. I made it to going to that story, the Conway Hall. I talk about going to a jazz club in London. I do a whole little, and I walk inside, and you could hear the music playing. I just got a gorgeous piece of saxophone thing. You walk down the steps. To get into the club, you had to take 2 steps down, both physically and socially. My kind of joke.
That's a great gag.
So I do this, but then I build up this whole thing. I have a band leading. Finally, it's just one man left wailing on a saxophone. This man dressed in black, breaking that thread. And this is something Billy taught me. Instead of going out and getting a gypsy yarn that has a balloon attached to it, or using ultra-colored yarn, which is a pretty frivolous kind of a thing, actually the trick, they don't notice it. And the yo-yo, all those things, that trick is so perfect because it's pure hands. I mean, It's here. And it's not difficult, but Billy taught me some great little techniques that when you're going to break it, you don't really need that much force to break a bit of thread, but they can see it in the back of the audience. And same when you'd move the shoulders when you did it. If it was so, even the people who couldn't see it could see it.
So you're selling it, yeah.
And it just really improved what went before and what went after. They got a little insight into me.
It gives it also, it's the rhythm, like you say, it's the rhythm of it, but it gives people a chance to breathe. It gives people a chance to settle, to get to know you. I just put even now, just recently, I put a new piece in the show that there was a trick by Oswald Williams called the red and green box that he did back in the early 1900s. And I finally got to see it. I talk about it actually in the first and second episode of this entire podcast, but I came up with my own version of it with a cardboard box, with like a large cardboard tissue paper box that's green on the inside and the outside with red tissue. And then it changes to a green box. Then it changes to a red box, which is red on the inside and outside with green tissue in it. So it's kind of got this lovely kind of moment that happens in the middle. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to bring it in, because the first 20 minutes of my show is like it's very frenetic, kinetic. So it was, for me, the thing was I found this version of the Torn and Restored tissue by Harbin called I'll Do That Again, which is, I think, one of the best tissue handlings there is. And added the box change, and then just literally started a bit of music after the insanity of the first 20 minutes and just said, now, a little bit of pure sleight of hand. And then I just shut up and sat on a stool and just did this thing in a spotlight. And you can feel the audience breathe for a second. You know what I mean? And then the act of stepping up off the stool and bringing the arms out, which happened organically during the run. I was at Hobson's Theatre, and I was doing it for the first time. And I found, like, just as the music swelled, if I stood up and I brought my arms up, the act of standing up off the stool kind of brought the audience back. And then you're back into the show. It felt good for me as an entertainer to go out there, get their attention, and now relax. Now we're friends. Let me share something. There was a complete shift in energy that I really enjoyed.
Well, that's it. And that's what it needs to be to keep it interesting. And that's why people need to really look. Actually, I don't know, I just did one the other day. I was looking at a tape, and, I'll go through it and make notes and things on it. And you just had something, I think, that was very important and simple.
Okay.
And bring it in.
Yeah, bring the focus in, right?
And I tried to do that personally. I don't know why I might be a legend to anybody, but I did some crazy shows back in the late 70s at the Castle. I had a punk magician act where I was Nick Costello. I was a big Elvis Costello fan. I had a punk haircut. There was one guy called Attila who was like the guy, and I had to, it stood up, and and I had a leopard skin jacket with a bright green lining. And people hated it. I've never said magic was not something they wanted to see. The hair didn't look great the rest of the time. I kind of looked like a scrappy Marine.
So you actually cut your hair like a punk? You didn't just wear a wig?
Well, yeah, I didn't think of that. She looks like a wig already. But I was...
Looks good on you.
Yeah, so it's... one thing I would like to just talk about is two things, if I may.
Wasn't that amazing? I'm telling you right now, this has been quite an honor to sit. Well, actually, I stand when I do this. Stand and chat with Nick Lewin, top professional. He's the guy that we all wanted to be, with his own show in Las Vegas, back when you could actually make money in Las Vegas. That was when Nick was doing his show. Can you imagine doing 265s a day, 6 days a week, packing that house out with the afternoon shows? Matt King does it now, and he's been doing it for many, many years. If you're in Las Vegas and you want to see an afternoon magic show, go see Matt King. He's killing it. He's the great. He's just awesome. I don't know Mac too well. We always just say hi, but I appreciate a top pro and someone who's like super, super commercial and really fun to watch. So maybe we'll do an episode on Vegas magic shows if you want. We can kind of I don't know if I can review them. Might be not a very good political thing to do, but we'll see. I'm not really a big political beast. Anyway, huge thanks to Nick for spreading the information, man, and just kind of giving us everything without any holds barred. I mean, that's what this podcast is, right? It's a no holds barred podcast. Thank you, Nick, for getting up and early in the morning for you, I know, and for sharing such great wealth. Onward and upward. Don't forget Magic on the Go. Magicians Only. I was going to say Magic on the Go is sponsored by Magic on the Go, which actually in some ways, you know what, it might be. Magic on the Go is something I always wanted to do. It's a place I wanted to, as a storehouse of information, as a resource for magicians or anyone who's interested in learning magic. It's more than a course, it's a resource. And you really have to take a look, go browse the content, magiconthego.com. There's so much. There's my card through handkerchief such stuff is on there as well. My new method of doing it, plus all these other methods that I teach. There's the egg bag stuff. There's how to do suspensions, how to make things cling to your fingers and float through the air. It's a lot of stuff. It's too much for me to mention. You really should just go and just go on. Just go check it out. magiconthego.com and go hit browse the content and go check it out. And then you can sign. If you actually sign up for it, I think. If you go sign up for it, I think it works out to less than $25 a month. $25 a month to access almost 1,000 videos. I mean, it's pretty insane. It's a great deal, and it's top quality stuff. $250 is what you would pay for one of Nick's routines, or maybe one of Bill Abbott's routines. $250 is what you would pay for a professional routine. You get everything on Magic on the Go. I would go check it out now before we start a new version of it, where we're going to do various membership types of membership, which kind of drip out the content. Right now, if you sign up, you have access to everything. I think that's pretty amazing. So go check it out, magiconthego.com. Thanks for watching. Thanks to Nick Lewin. Onward and upward. I'll see you on the next episode. Bye, guys.
Magic. It's not hard to learn. It's just hard to know where to start. It's really quite simple to learn magic. All you need is one thing: a mentor. Someone to take you by the hand and guide you through the vast, overwhelming, and often quite expensive world of magic. Someone who's been there and done that. I just don't know who that would be. Oh, right, me. I think the best way to learn anything is by seeing and then doing. And that's why I created Magic on the Go, an online, ever-growing visual master course in magic. So much to sink your teeth into. Hundreds of videos on every topic and for every skill level, and new tricks and lectures uploaded every month. And best of all, a global members forum so that you can interact and share secrets and ideas with your fellow magicians. I've sifted through it all so that you don't have to. I'm going to show you the best tricks, the craziest moves. Yeah. We're going to discuss presentation, patter, stage, cabaret, close-up.
No, yes.
I'm going to help you avoid the pitfalls with hand-picked material and specially designed playlists mixed with new tricks and lectures every month. Not to mention interviews with some of the world's greatest magicians, all instantly available on your phone, your tablet, or your computer. So let's learn together. Magic on the Go. I'll see you on the inside.